Hey everyone. So today we're doing a deep dive on something fascinating that you've been looking into, rewiring your brain for positivity.
Mm.
You've sent in just a ton of research articles and personal notes, even some book recommendations. Yeah, it's quite the collection. And I'm really excited to unpack all of this with our expert here and see what we can discover.
It is quite a collection. I was particularly intrigued by one of the questions that you posed
Hmm.
about whether we can actually overcome our brain's inherent negativity bias. That's a big one.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we all know that feeling of dwelling on the negative. It almost feels like it's hardwired. But then I came across this idea of neuroplasticity in the materials that you shared. And it seems like there's hope after all.
Absolutely. Neuroplasticity is essentially the brain's ability to change and adapt throughout our lives, forming new neural connections and strengthening existing ones. So it's like instead of being stuck with a fixed mindset, our brains are constantly evolving based on our experiences and the information we feed them.
I love that. It's almost like we have the power to remodel our own minds. One of the sources used this analogy of a garden. And I thought it was so brilliant. Instead of letting our minds become overgrown with weeds, those negative thoughts and patterns, we can actually cultivate a flourishing landscape of positive emotions and beliefs.
Yeah, that's such a powerful image. And it really gets to the heart of what we're talking about here. You included some research by Dr. Rick Hansen, who talks about how we can use targeted practices to strengthen specific neural pathways that are associated with positivity. He even mentions a study where participants who practiced gratitude regularly for just a few weeks showed increased gray matter density in the hippocampus, a brain region that's crucial for learning and emotional regulation.
Wow, so it's not just some feel-good concept. There's actual scientific evidence that we can physically change our brains by focusing on the positive. But where do we even begin? You've got a whole toolkit of techniques in here, everything from mindfulness to affirmations.
Yes, and it can feel overwhelming at first. So let's break it down. One of the most fundamental techniques you highlighted is mindfulness. Now we hear that word thrown around a lot, but what does it actually mean in a practical sense?
Well, one source described it as the ability to be present in the moment without judgment. It's about observing your thoughts and feelings without getting swept away by them.
Right, and it's not about emptying your mind completely. It's more about recognizing those negative thoughts as they arise, and then gently redirecting your attention to the present moment. One of your notes mentioned a technique called prompted awareness, which involves setting reminders throughout your day to just pause and check in with yourself. What are
Yeah.
you thinking? How are you feeling? It's like taking a mental snapshot.
Yeah, that's interesting because I often find myself getting lost in those what if spirals. Like, what if this happens or what if that goes wrong? It can be exhausting.
Absolutely. And those what if thoughts can actually trigger our stress response, even when there's no real threat. One of your sources suggested a simple trick: flip those what if thoughts to what is. So instead of worrying about the future, you ground yourself in the present reality. You shift your focus to things like, right now I'm safe, I'm breathing, I can feel the ground beneath my feet. It's about reclaiming your attention, focusing on what's actually happening in this moment.
That's such a practical tip. I can see how that would help interrupt those anxious thought patterns. But doesn't mindfulness also involve some form of meditation? To be honest, I've always struggled with the whole sitting still and clear my mind thing.
You're not alone, and meditation isn't the only way to practice mindfulness. You also highlighted some alternative approaches in your research. There's mindful walking, where you pay close attention to the sensations of each step, the feeling of the ground beneath your feet, the sounds and sights around you. There's also mindful eating, which involves savoring each bite of food, noticing the textures, aromas, and flavors.
That's great. I love how accessible mindfulness can be. It's not about becoming some kind of Zen master, right? It's about finding little ways to be more present throughout your day. And speaking of present moment awareness, you've also got a whole section on gratitude here. I'm a big believer in the power of gratitude, but I'm curious, how does simply feeling thankful actually change our brains? Is it more than just a nice sentiment?
Oh, it's definitely more than just a sentiment. You see, when we experience gratitude, our brains release dopamine and serotonin, those feel-good neurotransmitters that contribute to happiness and well-being. But here's the fascinating part. Research has shown that gratitude can also stimulate the release of oxytocin,
Hmm.
a hormone that's linked to social bonding and feelings of love and connection. So it's not just about feeling good individually, it's about fostering a sense of connection with others.
That's amazing. So gratitude is like a triple whammy of feel-good chemicals. No wonder it has such a powerful effect on our mood and outlook.
Exactly, and you've included a variety of gratitude exercises in your notes. Journaling is a popular one, where you write down a few things you're grateful for each day. You've also highlighted a study by Dr. Emmons, who found that people who kept gratitude journals reported feeling more optimistic and experiencing fewer physical symptoms.
That's really interesting. It seems like putting those feelings into words, whether written or spoken, somehow amplifies their impact.
Absolutely. And you don't have to limit yourself to journaling. You also mentioned the idea of creating a gratitude jar, where you write down things you're thankful for on slips of paper and then read them periodically. It's a tangible reminder of all the good things in your life.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's like creating a physical manifestation of your gratitude. And you know what? I bet you could even incorporate gratitude into something like taking a walk. Just noticing the beauty around you, the trees, the sky, the fresh air, and feeling appreciation for it.
You're right. That's a wonderful way to combine mindfulness and gratitude. You're essentially practicing gratitude walks, which some of your sources suggest, as a way to boost mood and reduce stress.
This is all so inspiring. It feels like we're already building a pretty solid foundation for rewiring our brain towards positivity,
Yeah.
but there's still so much more to uncover. You also included some really interesting research on cognitive reframing. And I'm curious, is that just another way of saying positive thinking?
That's a great question, and it's a common misconception. Cognitive reframing goes deeper than simply putting a positive spin on things. It's about actively challenging those automatic negative thoughts and replacing them with more balanced and realistic ones.
Can you give me a specific example?
Of course. One of your sources highlighted the work of Dr. Beck, who pioneered cognitive therapy. Let's say you're facing a challenge at work, and your immediate thought is, I'm going to fail at this, I'm not good enough. That's a pretty common negativity bias kicking in. But with cognitive reframing, you would challenge that thought by asking, what evidence do I have to support this belief? Is this thought helpful? Is there another way to view this situation? You might then reframe that thought to something like, this is a tough challenge, but I've overcome challenges before. I can learn from this experience and grow regardless of the outcome.
Wow, that's a completely different perspective. It's like shifting from a victim mentality to one of empowerment.
But isn't it a bit like fooling ourselves? I mean, what if the situation really is bad?
It's not about denying reality or pretending everything is perfect. It's about recognizing that our initial thoughts are often distorted by our negativity bias and choosing to view things through a more objective and balanced lens. That makes a lot of sense. It's about recognizing that our thoughts are not always facts and that we have the power to choose how we interpret them. But how do we actually get better at this?
Well, one technique you highlighted in your research is called thought challenging. It involves identifying those negative thought patterns and then actively questioning their validity. You can ask yourself, is this thought based on facts or feelings? Is it helpful or hurtful? What's a more realistic or balanced way to look at the situation? By repeatedly challenging those negative thoughts, you start to weaken their hold on you and create space for more positive and empowering beliefs.
This is fascinating. It's like we're becoming detectives of our own minds,
Yeah.
uncovering those hidden biases and then consciously choosing to rewrite the narrative.
Exactly. And another powerful reframing technique you highlighted is best possible self mental imagery. Have you had a chance to explore that one yet?
I've seen it mentioned, but I'd love to hear more about it.
It involves spending time visualizing your ideal future self. You imagine yourself achieving your goals, having fulfilling relationships, living a life that aligns with your values. You really immerse yourself in those positive emotions and sensations. And studies have shown that this type of visualization can actually boost your optimism, motivation, and even improve your performance.
Wow, that sounds amazing. It's like giving our brains a positive blueprint to work with. I'm already feeling more empowered just thinking about all of these techniques, but we've only just scratched the surface.
We have. And in the next part of our deep dive, we'll delve into the fascinating world of guided meditations and mindfulness exercises. Explore those book recommendations you've compiled, and unpack the science behind all of this positivity in even more depth.
I can't wait. This is already mind-blowing, and I'm so excited to keep learning and exploring.
Me too. See you on part 2.
Okay, I'm ready to dive back in. We covered some amazing ground already, from mindfulness to gratitude and cognitive reframing. What's next on our journey to rewiring our brains for positivity?
Well, you had some interesting notes on guided meditations, which can be a powerful way to enhance these practices we've been discussing.
Yes, I've always been intrigued by guided meditations, but I get a little overwhelmed by all the different types out there. Where do you even start?
It's true. There is a whole world of guided meditations out there. But remember that table you included in your research? the one listing different types of meditations and their benefits. It's actually a great starting point.
Oh, right, the one with loving kindness and gratitude and visualization meditation.
Exactly. That table is incredibly insightful, especially considering your personal goals. For instance, you mentioned wanting to cultivate more patience and compassion, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. I can get a little stressed out in my day-to-day life,
hmm
and I tend to react quickly.
Well, based on that table and your goals, loving kindness meditation could be particularly beneficial for you. This type of meditation focuses on cultivating feelings of love and kindness, first towards yourself and then expanding outwards to include others. Research suggests that practicing loving kindness meditation can lead to increased feelings of empathy, social connection, and even improve your vagal tone, which is associated with a calmer nervous system.
Wow, that's fascinating. So it's not just about feeling good, it's about actually rewiring our physiology for more peace and resilience.
Precisely. And it's not just about theory. You even included a study in your notes where participants who engaged in loving kindness meditation for 8 weeks showed significant increases in positive emotions and a reduction in negative emotions, like anger and frustration.
That's incredible. I'm definitely adding loving kindness meditation to my list to try. But what about those other types of guided meditations on that table? What about gratitude meditations?
Since you're already a big believer in gratitude, incorporating it into a guided meditation could really amplify those benefits we talked about earlier. Remember how we discussed gratitude boosting dopamine and serotonin? Well, studies have shown that combining gratitude with meditation can lead to even greater increases in these neurotransmitters.
So it's like taking our gratitude practice to the next level.
Exactly. Guided gratitude meditations often incorporate visualization techniques, where you vividly imagine the people and things you're grateful for, bringing those feelings to life in your mind's eye.
I love that. I can almost feel those warm, fuzzy feelings already. And what about visualization meditations? Those sound intriguing.
They are. Visualization meditations go beyond gratitude and focus on achieving specific goals. You vividly imagine yourself succeeding, whether it's acing a presentation, reaching a fitness goal, or even mastering a new skill. Research suggests that this type of mental rehearsal can actually prime your brain for success by strengthening the neural pathways that are associated with those actions.
So it's like giving our brains a mental workout for success.
Exactly. And you included some fascinating research by Dr. Gabriel Ottingen, who studies a technique called mental contrasting. It involves visualizing your desired future self, but then also acknowledging and imagining the obstacles that might stand in your way.
That sounds counterintuitive. Wouldn't focusing on obstacles discourage us?
Interestingly, her research has shown the opposite. It turns out that acknowledging those obstacles actually increases our commitment and motivation to overcome them.
Wow, that's really powerful. It's like we're giving ourselves a dose of reality, but also empowering ourselves to face those challenges head on.
You've got it. And,
Yeah.
your collection also includes some incredible books that delve deeper into these topics.
Oh, yes. I'm a total bookworm, so those recommendations really caught my eye. Where should we start?
Well, Hardwiring Happiness by Dr. Rick Hansen was one that stood out to me. He goes into great detail about the neuroscience of happiness and provides practical tools for rewiring your brain towards positivity, many of which we've been discussing today.
I've heard great things about that book. And what about Buddha's Brain by the same author?
Yes, that one dives into the fascinating intersection of neuroscience and Buddhist teachings on mindfulness and compassion.
Those both sound right up my alley. And what about The Happiness Advantage by Sean Aker?
Ah, yes. Aker's work is fantastic. He takes a more research-driven approach, highlighting studies that show how cultivating positive emotions can actually enhance our performance and success in various areas of life.
So it's not just about feeling good. It's about leveraging that positivity to achieve our goals.
Exactly. And he argues that happiness is not simply the result of success, but rather a precursor to it.
That's a really interesting perspective shift. It's like we need to prioritize happiness as a foundation for achieving our goals,
Yeah,
rather than waiting for success to make us happy.
precisely. And, you also included a book that I think is particularly relevant to our discussion on rewiring the brain. Train Your Mind, Change Your Brain by Sharon Begley.
Ooh, that sounds intense. What's that one about?
It delves into the incredible research being done on neuroplasticity, specifically how meditation and other mind training practices can physically alter the structure and function of our brains.
Mind-blowing. I'm adding all of these to my reading list. Now, what about those online courses you mentioned?
Right. You had a few listed that might be of interest. Dr. Rick Hansen, the author of those books we just discussed, also has a course called Positive Neuroplasticity Training, which goes into even more depth on the techniques for rewiring your brain.
That sounds incredible. I bet it's packed with practical exercises and insights.
It is. And if you're looking for something more condensed, there's also Powerful Positive Thinking, Retrain Your Brain in 1 hour by Faith Hill Coaching.
That's a great point. Not everyone has the time or bandwidth for a long, intensive course.
Exactly. And then there's the PQ program by Positive Intelligence, which focuses on developing mental fitness and emotional intelligence.
So many amazing resources. I love how there are options for every learning style and commitment level.
Me too. Now, I think it's important to step back for a moment and talk about the science behind all of this positivity.
Yes. Let's get into the nitty-gritty of how these techniques actually work on a neurological level.
You got it. Remember when we talked about neuroplasticity, that incredible ability of our brains to change and adapt? Well, research is showing that these practices we've been discussing, from mindfulness and gratitude to cognitive reframing and positive affirmations, can actually stimulate the growth of new neurons and strengthen the connections between them.
So it's not just some abstract concept. We're actually physically changing the wiring of our brains.
Exactly. And specific areas of the brain are particularly affected by these practices.
Like which one?
Well, for instance, the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for planning, decision-making, and emotional regulation, has been shown to increase in volume and activity in people who regularly engage in mindfulness and other positive psychology practices.
So we're not just feeling better. We're actually enhancing our ability to think clearly, make better choices, and manage our emotions more effectively.
Exactly. And another area that shows significant changes is the hippocampus, that brain region we talked about earlier, which is involved in memory and learning. Research has found that practices like mindfulness can increase gray matter density in the hippocampus, which can improve our ability to learn new information and form positive memories.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
It's like we're creating a more fertile ground for positive experiences to take root and flourish.
You're getting it. And let's not forget about the amygdala, that almond-shaped structure that's responsible for our fear and stress response. Studies have shown that practices like mindfulness and compassion meditation can actually reduce the activity of the amygdala, leading to a calmer and more balanced emotional state.
So we're essentially teaching our brains to chill out a bit and not overreact to every perceived threat.
Precisely. And, you also highlighted some inspiring success stories in your materials.
Yeah.
Real people who have used these techniques to transform their lives.
Yes. I love hearing about real-world examples. It makes it feel more attainable,
Absolutely. You mentioned Walter Chen, the founder of that project management tool. He talked about how he struggled with negativity and stress, which was impacting his work and well-being. But then he started incorporating mindfulness and gratitude practices into his daily routine.
And what happened?
He said that it completely transformed his outlook. He was able to manage stress more effectively, his productivity increased, and he even felt more creative and inspired in his work.
That's amazing. It's like he unlocked a whole new level of potential within himself.
He did. And it highlights the fact that these techniques aren't just some fluffy self-help fad. They can have a real, tangible impact on our lives.
It's so inspiring to see the transformation is possible.
It is. And I think it's important to remember that rewiring for positivity is an ongoing journey, not a destination.
Right. It's like that gardening analogy we talked about earlier. We need to keep tending to our mental gardens, nurturing the positive and weeding out the negative.
Exactly. And that brings us to an important question that you raised in your research. How do we balance this cultivation of positivity with staying grounded in reality?
That's a big one. I mean, we don't want to become so positive that we're ignoring potential dangers or becoming detached from reality.
You're right. It's not about creating some kind of Pollyannish view of the world where we deny challenges or pretend everything is perfect.
So how do we find that balance? How do we stay positive and hopeful while also acknowledging the complexities and challenges of life?
That's what we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive.
I can't wait. This is getting so interesting.
Me too. See you in part 3.
All right, we're back for the final part of our deep dive into rewiring your brain for positivity. It's been such an incredible journey so far.
It really has.
We've explored so much from neuroplasticity to mindfulness, gratitude, even cognitive reframing. And we've even touched on how these practices can physically change our brains, creating a more fertile ground, for positive emotions and experiences. But, I keep coming back to that question we were talking about at the end of the last part, about how to balance this intentional cultivation of positivity with like staying grounded in reality.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't want to become so focused on the positive that we ignore potential dangers.
Or
Well,
become detached from the real world, right?
right. Yeah, that's such a crucial question. And it really gets to the heart of why this whole deep dive has been so fascinating. It's not about creating some kind of artificial bubble of positivity
Yeah.
where we deny challenges or pretend that everything is always perfect. That's not realistic. And it's
Yeah.
definitely not helpful in the long run.
Right. It's more about cultivating a resilient mindset,
Right.
right? One that can acknowledge and navigate challenges without getting completely swept away by negativity or fear.
Yeah.
But how do we actually find that balance? Well, one of the key insights that emerged from your research is that our negativity bias, while often seen as a problem, actually served a really important evolutionary purpose.
Oh, interesting. In what way?
Well, think about our ancestors facing constant threats in their environment. They needed to be highly attuned to danger in order to survive. That negativity bias, that tendency to focus on potential threats, helped them stay vigilant and avoid predators or other dangerous situations.
So, like, our brains were wired for better safe than sorry.
Exactly. But here's the thing. That ancient wiring, which was so essential for survival, isn't always so helpful in the modern world. We're bombarded with negative news and information constantly, and it can trigger our stress response even when there's no immediate danger.
It's like our ancient wiring is getting hijacked by the 24/7 news cycle and social media.
You got it. And that's where the power of rewiring comes in. By consciously cultivating positivity, we're not erasing our negativity bias altogether. We're essentially recalibrating it,
Yeah.
teaching our brains to find a healthier balance.
So we're not aiming to become blissfully ignorant, but rather more discerning about what we let into our minds and how we react to it.
Exactly. It's about developing a more resilient mindset, one that can acknowledge challenges and potential threats without getting swept away by fear or negativity.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like we're developing a more nuanced understanding of the world,
Huh.
one that recognizes both the good and the bad without letting either extreme dictate our experience.
You're getting it. And one of the practical strategies that you highlighted in your research is to be mindful of your information intake. You specifically mentioned limiting exposure to negative news and social media,
Hmm.
especially before bedtime.
Yeah, that's a tough one. It's so easy to get sucked into those endless scrolls of negativity.
It is, but it's so crucial for protecting our mental well-being. It's like creating a mental filter to shield ourselves from that constant barrage of negative information.
So it's about setting boundaries
Yeah.
and being intentional about what we allow into our mental space.
Absolutely. And on the flip side, it's equally important to actively seek out positive and uplifting content. You mentioned surrounding yourself with positive people, reading inspiring books, listening to uplifting podcasts.
Yes. It's like we need to give our brains a healthy dose of positivity
Hmm.
to counteract all the negativity we're exposed to in the world.
Exactly. And remember all those techniques we discussed: mindfulness, gratitude, cognitive reframing, affirmations. Those are all incredibly powerful tools for shifting our mindset, building resilience, and finding that sweet spot between optimism and realism.
Wow, this has been such an incredible deep dive. I feel like I've gained a whole new understanding of how our brains work
Yeah,
and how we can actively shape our own well-being.
me too. And I really hope you feel empowered to start experimenting with these techniques, finding what works best for you, and creating a life that's both positive and fulfilling.
Absolutely. It's like we've been given a roadmap to happiness,
Yeah.
and now it's up to us to take the journey, right?
Yeah. That's a perfect way to put it. Remember, it's a journey, not a destination. There will be ups and downs along the way. But with consistent effort and the right tools, you can cultivate a more resilient and joyful mind.
Thank you so much for guiding us through this deep dive. It's been truly insightful.
It's been my pleasure.
And to our listener, thank you for joining us on this exploration of rewiring your brain for positivity. We hope you feel inspired and equipped to continue this journey on your own. Remember, you have the power to create a more positive and fulfilling life. One thought, one action, one choice at a time.
Keep cultivating that mental garden.
Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.